I have something ringing over here, which means that usually something's unplugging, so sorry about that. Next week we start our class on the white fragility, trying to figure out how is it that we are working against the better interests in this moment, specifically we as people of privilege and as people of power in the midst of a space where not everyone has that same thing, isn't able to say that same thing about themselves. So if you can be part of that, I'd love to have you be part of that. But today we're talking about being the teacher. And so we're going to talk about the empowerment tools of the teacher, and then later about the shadow aspects of what it is to be a teacher. The first thing, I don't know why it is, those bells are my thing doing something where stuff is coming on and off. So I'm sorry that that's happening right now. I don't know why it is. It's particularly interesting that all that's ringing and dinging around me right as we're about to talk about one of the first empowerment tools of the teacher, and that is silence. How many have realized that silence is not simple in our world?
Difficult.
It's really difficult, especially because of these magnificent tools that we have, but that interrupt us really often. Sometimes we like it. Like if you're in a boring meeting, how many have ever done this? Oh, okay, I'll go take this. Right? So sometimes we use it as a way to be able to opt out of being present, but part of what silence is about trying to figure out how to not do that. And I liked that she connected silence to solitude. Do you know the difference between the two? Okay. One is more about you, and one is more about the world around you. How do you silence all those noises, good and bad, that are flowing into you? But the other is, how do you silence those noises inside of you? How do you give yourself time away from all of those things which will speak in a million different ways? And both of them are similar, but they take sometimes different skills to try to develop them. So which do you do better? Are you better at just silencing yourself, or better at removing yourself from all the other noise around you?
Oh. Well, I'll speak to that. First, stick my mouth in the middle of it. I'm not as good about focusing on solitude the way I would like to be. I'm too responsive to other distractions. I'm too responsive to other, I guess you would call them distractions. My antenna is out way too much to what's happening around me. I can be silent, but not as well at solitude. I'm working on it.
The hard part is that part of what does that is a good thing. If you're listening to the voices around you, it usually means that you're trying to hear and be responsive to those voices, which is not a bad thing. But one of the things that Jesus did often was go to the other side of the lake to try to find some solitude, right? Some time away from all of that.
But the distractions followed him.
But the distractions do follow, as they do all of us. Yeah. How about the rest of you? Silence or solitude? Which is easier for you?
I'm comfortable in a quiet space, but not necessarily as a self-reflective way of being there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And at least part of that quiet space is trying to hear that inner guidance, as she puts it. And she also put transpersonal experiences, something that's not you that does speak to you in the midst of that silent space.
That's solitude.
And sometimes we're trying just to get everything to be silent so that we just don't have to deal with it, because there's a lot of noise around us.
Amen to that.
Yeah. And that's a good skill in and of itself. But in that silent space, we want to also hear what's there. And sometimes it's listening to our own stuff, listening to our guidance. Like one of the things I do when I run is I repeat things and I speak things, and sometimes some of the stuff that comes out in a commentary comes because I'm in that space of silently running and hearing a voice beyond just myself, or hearing the voice inside of me. So it's not wrong to hear that voice, but our own voices play tapes a lot. And at least part of what you're trying to do in silence, not in solitude, but in silence, is trying to figure out how not to listen to your own voice only.
Mhm.
I think it's a little complicated because I can be, my silence time is when I'm taking a breath,
Uh-huh.
when I'm stepping back and reflecting and what's going to be coming next. But I do think I have to listen to my inner voice,
Yes, yes,
because my inner voice is where my inner intelligence is,
that's right.
my inner wisdom. And so I think that's something that's very important. As a coach, I tell people, you already know what you need to do.
That's right.
You're just not doing it.
Yeah, I hope you heard, Mike. I don't want there to be any confusion here. It is not when you're in silence that you're not trying to hear what's inside of you already. That's at least one of the skills there. But there's also that skill of not listening just to the voice you've already heard, already placed inside of you, already know. It's also trying to expand that to the voice that is larger than just that, or at least just that which I'm listening to right now. Right? Because sometimes that silent time makes me hear my dad's voice that says something.
Exactly. That's what I was
Are
just
you sure you want to do that? Right? And it makes, and it's my inner voice still, but it's not just my voice. Right? How about the rest of you? Silence or solitude, or both?
Well, because of my health issues, I do a lot of both. And I've read a book recently on solitude. And I do meditation every day for at least 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
But to be creative, like I do writing, I do drawing, I read a lot, and I have this beautiful view out my living room, out my patio doors here. And I can go places that I couldn't if I was real busy.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, what's between my ears fascinates me.
Uh-huh.
And I go places, and if I have a thought like, hear my mother in my head or something, I'll sit and I'll trace, like, okay, what triggered that, and if you don't have quiet and some time to do, I also, I'm not now, but when I have been in excruciating pain at times, I couldn't handle any outside. I couldn't have the TV on, radio on, music on, nothing.
Mm.
And it's like I went to this place where, okay, this is going to sound really weird, but I had a long conversation with Jesus.
Good.
And it just really and truly, it's like I couldn't have done that, I don't think, if I wasn't in this really critical space between my head and stuff. But it's like I had this long time to be there and just really, really reflect on I don't know, Jesus to me is a historical figure. I honestly and truly don't know if I believe I don't think he's the son of God. That's just me. You guys can disagree. That's just what my conclusion is at this point in time. That may change tomorrow. But I do see him as someone who's done a great deal of reflection and gives me a lot of guidance in my life. So, okay, that's me.
That sounds good and reassuring, Judy.
Yeah.
Sometimes I would really rather be out and be busy, but since I don't own a car, I can't even offer to donate my time anywhere because I can't be guaranteed that on a certain day I'll be able to do it.
Right.
Anyway, I'll shut up now.
So one of the phrases she used to talk about silence and solitude was that it's a healing salve. And I like that idea, but we have to take it away from some of the ways we usually use those kinds of things. Like if I cut my arm, I put something on there to help it heal. It's not necessarily a wound like that. It's that something inside of me needs to be changed, moved, modified, drawn towards something else. And what silence is primarily able to do is helps me to be able to not focus on what it is that's already in front of me, but what else could be in front of me. Either a problem or a solution. Because whatever it is that's right in front of me sometimes takes so much of my attention that I can't see anything but that. For example, right now, go ahead.
Was it kind of what Judy was saying when she said she was entirely focused? She couldn't, nothing else would come in. She couldn't hear any sound because you were so focused on your pain.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It could be the pain. There's all kinds of things that can be that which diverts our attention. Right. At least part of what we're trying to do is say, let's do something else. And it's not even that what's there in the way is a bad thing, right? If I'm preparing for the commentary on Sunday, well, that could be a bad thing. But if I'm preparing for that and I'm focused so much on that, I might not also be hearing what other voices could be speaking, either to inform that or to draw me beyond that. Right? And at least part of what all this is about, this part of things, is about hearing a larger story than what right now is teaching me. But it means we have to both turn off things, whatever the voices are that are speaking too much or too loudly, and purposely turn on other voices. That's why I love that silence is then connected to hearing the ancestor spirits. And they had a very broad sense of who the ancestors were, not just the ones who gave birth in order for you to be alive, but also the ones who gave birth to ideas within you, that give birth to life around you. All of those ancestors who in some way or another are speaking into this moment right now. Who is it that you need to hear in that time of silence? What needs to be given birth?
The voice that is coming in for me just the last 10 days to 2 weeks is slavery. The whole story of slavery and my own whiteness and my own way in which I've lived as a white privileged person.
Yes.
It's been very jarring voice to come up within me.
Yes. Thank you. Because any space of privilege that we're in any way makes it hard for us to hear someone who's not in that space. Mike, you and I, as men in America, have enjoyed privilege that the women around us haven't. And we have been, I don't mean just the two of us, we as a gender have been way too comfortable with not listening to that larger voice that we need to hear. And I think that that's what this moment is calling out of us as white America as well. But it complicates things, right? We had, I talk about like in the gender issues, we had it much simpler before where roles were very clearly defined. And now we as men have to figure out a much broader and fluid thing, which isn't as simple. And so we sometimes fight against it. But partially that's because the division of labors was kind of like this, and we're trying to say, let's put it more even. And so we fight against some of those things. And I think that's the racial equity issues that we're dealing with here now too. Is our comfort bought at the price of somebody else's discomfort? And can we in the silence hear that larger voice? So what are some of the family patterns that your ancestors call into you? Sometimes they call into it and saying, don't change it, don't change it. But that's where you may need to struggle with. You know, I've joked a lot about my cousin Bob, but it is not just Bob. I have lots of cousins, and many of them are stuck in the old cowboy way of being, right? The old, I've got all the right answers way of being. And I have to say, do I continue to hear just that part of my ancestors, or do I break a pattern? When have you had to break a pattern in your life? And how did you find the strength to do it?
Wow, a pattern in your life.
Mary, we can't quite hear you. You're not close enough to the microphone or something.
Oh, I'm probably mumbling while I'm thinking. Actually, my family was very open and about all manner of issues. I guess you would call it today liberal. But the one thing that was destructive in my family, and a pattern that is very difficult to break, is that there had been a family secret. And between my mother and my father shared the information, but no one else knew it. And that was that my father had had an affair during the Second World War, and I had a half brother. And because my father was keeping that a secret from everyone, he was supporting my half brother's mother. And when I was going into college, and my younger brother that I lived with was going to college, Dad said, I can't afford to send both of you to school. It finally dawned on me after I found out that I had a half brother, that in order for me to apply for scholarships of any kind, whether they were work scholarships or academic scholarships, my mother and father would have to disclose financial information. And part of that would be that he was supporting a third child. And God forbid in those days that you would acknowledge this kind of a sin or problem.
Right.
No one knew it. And until my father had died, and my mother was in the hospital in TMC one time, and she thought she was going to die. So I go over there, and she told me the quote secret. And my first words out of my mouth is, my God, that explains everything.
Yeah.
On the other hand, that kind of a family history and ancestral history, it weighs extremely heavy. Secrets are poison. Right. Transparency is so vital in families.
Yeah, but you know why that happens most of the time? Okay, so if the kid's 5, let's say that you're 5 when that happened, you don't tell a 5-year-old, Dad just had an affair, right? You just don't. That's not an appropriate thing to share with a 5-year-old. But at some point or another, it becomes appropriate, right, to maybe have that be part of the conversation, to share that you have a brother, but trying to figure out when that time is, and to get past the inertia that has made it so you haven't spoken for as long as what you haven't spoken is difficult. Because if you start at 5 and suddenly it's been 10 years and you haven't spoken anything about that brother to that 15-year-old now it's like, ooh, how do I start the conversation?
Well, the challenge is that my father left without saying anything to us about it. It's my mother who revealed everything. And I think that what happens is the shame around it is what caused him to be in that place, because he had a large family and he was the youngest child and the first one to go to college. So he had a lot of pride in that. And to admit that you had not been faithful to your marriage vows was just critical.
But I think the quote by Stephen Mitchell was a good quote. Did you read it? It said, "True mastery can be gained by letting things go their own way. It can't be gained by interfering." And oftentimes when we're in the middle of something like that, what we want to do is go back and fix what Dad did wrong, right? Fix the thing that's causing the problem now. And we don't get to do that. What we get to do is in this moment receive that was something that happened, that was part of what the ancestors gave to us, and say, and now join the conversation about how do we become the best possible people post that. But we often want to fix that, right? Whether it was done to us or done way before us. We don't get to choose all of that, do we? But by hearing this story, by sharing this story, by being honest about the story, then we get to make a decision about what do I do now? And what she talked about were the patterns. Do I become the pattern of the past, or do I break that cycle in some way or another?
Right. Yeah.
How do I not extend whatever is dysfunctional about the family while embracing all that is wonderful? Because we all have wonderful and not so wonderful in our family tree, right? And we have to figure out how to draw the very best possible out of that. Because even in the midst of their flawedness, Dad was not a horrible person because he had an affair. He might have been horrible for other reasons. But you know what? But that one event doesn't define the whole of the person, right? And you have to say, what else is there that I can draw from in strength? And what else is there that I can draw from in the antithesis? I'm not going to be like that. Because both of those things help us to be better. Both their failures and their successes. Right?
And family dynamic, yes. And there's always the trickster.
Yeah, there's always a trickster. And in many ways, those family voices are trying to help us to figure that out. So when I talk about my Granny May, or I talk about my grandpa Milo, part of what I'm doing is laughing at my family because they had whatever flaws that they had. They were the people that they were because of some of the things that they had to choose. And so I can say, but I'm not quite like that. But at the same time, I marvel at how they got through the challenges of what they had to get through. That made it so that, you know, like I laugh about my dad liking one of his favorite desserts was bread and milk with a little bit of sugar poured on top of it.
Yeah.
You know why that was one of his favorite desserts? Because that's all they had in the Depression. Right? And he was young kid to teenager through the Depression. And I'm glad I didn't have to live there because that formed him in ways that are challenging.
But that was an interesting choice that he made, because he could have decided having bread and milk and sugar on it reminded him of something negative.
Yeah.
And he chose to see that as a reminder of being thankful,
Right.
that he had more than that now.
That's right. That's right. And that was enough, that was strong enough. And so I can laugh about that and say, I'm glad I'm not that, and I don't have to eat that. But I can also say, what strength does it take to be able to survive through a time like that? And how do I garner that same strength and bring it into my space, my generation?
I thought it was only my father that did that.
Yeah.
Milk and sugar?
Bread and milk.
Yeah.
Right. Well, your dad was on the streets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think it was something he learned in the Depression. You know, we got 5 other women here that haven't said a word.
No.
But a lot of all this is being in that seating meditation place, that space of openness, that space of come and teach me. What is it that your ancestors have taught you? Who are you today because of what they taught? And you can talk about a specific person. My Granny May said this or did this. You can talk about how they taught in the positive or in the negative, but what have they taught you?
I think I learned to really become determined. And as a woman, you know, who was finally having opportunities that my mother and my grandmother really couldn't have, because I, you know, got out of high school in the mid-70s and went into college, and my mother had gotten actually a master's in music, which was pretty amazing for her time. But anyway, you know, she hadn't been able to, you know, pursue her career as much as she wanted to, and neither did her mother, who was trained in piano, but didn't get as much training as she wanted, and then but did teach piano lessons to kids during the Depression and helped them get through the Depression. She and my grandpa, and so I really saw what they had struggled with, and that really helped me to realize that that I wanted to take advantage of the opportunities and that it meant so much. And I remember my grandmother, you know, just being very proud, you know, of having this granddaughter graduating college, heading off to New York, you know, having ambitions and not curtailing them, and not choosing a family first to, and then, you know, maybe doing something after, but really putting my career first.
Yes, thank you very much. And the thing of it is that you heard great stories that allowed you to make the choices that you made. And somebody else hearing the same stories might make a different choice. So it's not necessarily that there's a singular story you can pull out of it. It's that you're hearing and allowing those voices to inform you, that larger voice to inform you. So thank you.
Yeah.
How about the rest of you? Oh, go ahead.
I just wanted to add something. I think one of the things I really heard is their pain and their lack of fulfillment around not having the choices. It was just, I could see it was really hard.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. And that's a good internalization of those things. I appreciate that. Laura?
I probably learned part of my implicit bias from my father.
Mm-hmm.
He was an engineer, and he managed the physical plant of a manufacturing facility in Milwaukee, where I grew up. And this was during the 60s and the 70s. And part of his job was to negotiate with the unions. And he and most of the employees in the manufacturing plant, probably half of them were African American. and he he had his prejudices, and he brought those home. We were young children, but you know, those memories of talking about how he struggled with the unions, and I mean, he was a racist. And I've certainly thought about that prior to what's happening now. That implicit bias that you grow up with, you don't have any direct experience, but you certainly have this, you know, deep memory of your parents' experience.
That's right.
That has influenced mine, certainly my implicit bias.
Sure. And you could just accept that story and carry that bias right into where you're at with no personal experience, or you can say, does that still match where I'm living and what I want to do with where I'm living?
Right.
Yeah. You do have to, in order to do the second, you have to get past some of the sense of betrayal that you might feel like you're giving to, but I don't think our ancestors care anymore. I think our ancestors aren't there fighting for themselves to be right. And I think that it's okay for us to learn from that and not betray, but really to bless their journey by being better as we move forward. Because there's not a parent that doesn't want their child to be better than they are. They don't always know what that means, but they all hope that their child is able to be one step further.
Yeah, there was something, a phrase that I've had to try to unlearn what I had accepted when I was younger as being the way things were.
Yeah. The way things were is not always a good thing.
No.
Right?
There were a lot of benefits, but at the cost of somebody else.
Very often at the cost of. And sometimes at the cost of ourselves too. Right? Sometimes the things that where one of my ancestors had to be from left them in a scarred space of one sort or another. And their message might be, don't do this so you don't carry the scar. But I have to be able to be willing to sit and hear that and observe, not in a judgmental way. That's the importance of the sitting meditation, is that you're sitting there in an openness of, a receiving of, so that then you can take that and form it into a better movement forward. Right? But it means you sometimes have to wait and listen and not just move with it. You have to observe and be willing to truly go, not just in the advice they give, but in the right way to do something. And that observation is an art form. The art of observing is what we should do in that time of silence, in that time of calling up the ancestors, is to use that time to observe larger. Because if we don't, then we get into the shadow aspects of things, right? Where it talked about positionality, that I'm so strong on this space that I can't be moved ever from this. And as a teacher, okay, so I hope you saw in all of this area, that a lot of it's focused on how are we learning. And the importance of that is, unless somebody is a learner, they cannot truly be a teacher. So if we're sitting in a space of positionality where I have the only right answer, then I'm going to be a poor teacher, because I can't hear the larger aspects of what's going on. And so all of this is saying, how do I open myself up so I can then share larger than just my own position. Does that make sense? And so the shadow aspects are almost always a closed down, can't be moved, and therefore can't really teach aspect. Where did you see? Well, go ahead.
I was going to say Mike had seen Christiana Amanpour doing an interview with a man named Schneck, who was, because of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, beginning to move out of his conservative evangelical perspective. Could you say something about that, Mike? Because that's about going from being 100% right about everything, I have the answers, to I'm not sure if I have the right answers anymore. Would you say that, Mike? Because I didn't see it. You did.
It was last night. He was being interviewed, and he was the principal person in the Bonhoeffer place, and he was saying even evangelicalism is dying because of its attitude, and he was saying his own personal struggle with confronting how to unlearn what he had always done. I was very, very articulate.
Yes.
And I thought it was a marvelous presentation. But before the session is over, if this is our last session on this book, I want to make sure that because these 4 steps are the foundational steps of St. Francis Chrysalis,
Yes.
the men's group, and it has been going on for almost 20 years. And those 4 steps have been one of the best ways for me, guidance for me to live.
Yeah.
And if we can bounce back and forth from one of the 4 steps when it's needed, and to be able to recognize, this is not where I am right now, which of the other 3 will lead me in the right direction?
Yeah.
And I just wanted to make sure that came up before we ended this time.
And Mike, thank you, because I think that that's important. I hope that everyone got a sense of, you don't have to choose, this is the one and only that I can be. But that all of them are important, and really it's which one is the appropriate side of me to emphasize right now. And maybe some of them are more my strength, maybe some of them are where I naturally come from, but to walk on all 4 paths makes us the very strongest person that we can be, the most balanced person that we can be.
I mean, I don't want to dominate, but what I learned was when someone said to me, when I'm confronted with an issue, what is the most healing thing I can do at the moment? And if I ask myself that question, I can mentally process through these 4 steps and say to myself, there's the place where all I need to do is be open to outcome.
Yeah.
Because I'm that. Or the other one that says, for the warrior, all I have to do is just show up.
Yeah.
And be there for present, or pay attention to what has heart and meaning. So anyway, this is why I'm sitting in through these sessions, because this book has been a major, major piece of how I've spent the last 20 years.
Nice. Thank you, Mike. So as you're moving towards developing the teacher in you, how is it that you fall prey to the shadow side? And remember that the shadow side, one thing I was very aware of with this, but on a general rule that I'm very aware of, is that the shadow sides are all just the opposite of something that's really good. So for example, positionality is the opposite of flexibility, that I can move into any space and come at it from a number of different aspects. Whereas if I'm doing positionality, it's that I'm standing in one space and can't see anything but that point of view, anything but that perspective, anything but that direction, right? The opposite of control is trust. And the more we can develop those other aspects and move away from that which narrows us that's what we're trying to do. And especially like what Mike says, sometimes it's not so much that it's a shadow, it's that it's something else that I'm emphasizing. Maybe right now something else is called for than what my first instinct is, or what I've done before. So when we, go ahead.
This is Joyce. And something that Laura said before just sort of jogged some memories for me. And I just want to, because it sort of all follows in line here. It's just sort of a real revelation for me. My father also was involved in Milwaukee in contact. He was a salesperson calling on a major manufacturer where they were having a lot of problems with employees, and the unions were sort of ineffective and or effective in protecting bad employees, let's put it that way. And he used to come home and complain about the employees, and many of them were of Black ancestry. I don't know that I necessarily took it as being all Blacks, but you know, that implication was kind of there. So I'm from very much the same background, and so I carried that thought with me for many years. And then I married my husband, who worked in a factory, and we were very good friends with somebody that he worked with and his wife, and their son went to work as a, I don't know what he was, something or other, that he was a contractor that was working in that shop that my husband and our friend Joe worked in. And he would come home and tell his mother stories about these guys and how infantile they were in playing games and joking with each other and doing things that would be not what you would expect a good employee to do. Disrupt the, you know, their prime thing during the day was to find some way to disrupt the status quo. And so I started thinking about that as Laura was talking. And so I don't see it as much a thing of race as maybe the attitude that we have always had, not necessarily we, but that has always been had, where the table is not a round table, that it's a long table with a corporate head at the top, and in each department you've got somebody that is the father figure, dispenser of rules and regulations, and you're going to do it my way, as opposed to eliciting a team approach to getting the work done and accomplishing the best for the company that they're working for. So that kind of somewhere along the line, many years ago, I had a class that I took that kind of dealt with that approach as being a woman's approach, a feminist approach, where women don't necessarily deal with this top-down, do it my way or else, that we elicit assistance and we elicit people to cooperate. And so when you talk about the shadow side, I'm seeing that as the shadow side of the way that we have always done things.
That's right.
And we need to maybe just incorporate that change into our way of doing business and living.
Yeah. The tough part though, Joyce, if I've never considered the possibility that which I have done my whole life has negative aspects to it. And I don't even want to say that it's wrong. because there's good things about it. There's stuff that it has done to move me forward. But if I consider it as a perfect tool, then I miss how it is that it's not perfect. And I miss how there might be some other tool that can do part of what I'm trying to do with what I do even better. Mm. And at one point she said that the two biggest sources of harm are fear and ignorance. And I think that's because both of those, either because I don't know enough and so I only see this much, or because I'm so fearful of things, of something that I only see it, are very limited vision type of movements. And so if I can figure out how to educate myself so that my ignorance is not as small, and I broaden my world, or I can somehow move beyond my fear and see something larger than whatever it calls me to. Those are both movements to a larger world, a larger perspective. And that's what all of this is about, is trying to help us be the full person that we can be, not just the small. And yet, for men, that hierarchical world is what sounds really familiar and easy to follow. And so we cling to it, where we really should be hearing more of our feminine. And the hard part is that just those words, masculine and feminine, get in the way sometimes, because I'm supposed to be a he-man, masculine man, so I can't do the feminine, right? And so we put judgments on even those types of things. So maybe if we had better terms, maybe we could help men move that direction, or women move into a better relationship between the two sides of us that way.
Well, part of that got to be trust.
Yeah.
Even in this group, I assumed in this group, I made a big assumption by speaking the little bit that I did about my half brother, and the fact that until I was practically 50, I didn't know he existed. Yeah. That I was putting a lot of trust in the fact that everyone here wouldn't talk about me, or wouldn't say to other people, "You wouldn't believe what Mary Harris has, her father was bigamist," or whatever. Okay, so trust is really important. If you don't feel trust, you can't reveal, you can't be transparent, you can't participate fully. And maybe sometimes I stick too much in it and I talk too much, but I had a friend one time and I knew had serious problems, and when I was telling people how happy I was to meet my brother, and I was talking about what had happened, she left the group. She said, "Oh, I can't, too much information, Mary, too much information. And she walked away because she couldn't deal with a secret in the family. And I knew there was stuff in her family.
Right. Which is probably why she doesn't want you to deal with it, because it puts the judgment on her. But see, that's going back to what we said was what really important to the way of the teacher, and that's detachment from. That we don't put all this emotional attachment. We don't let all that be tied together in a way that it paralyzes us or holds us under a certain space, but that we allow ourselves to continue to grow and learn. And that's an ongoing effort, because as soon as you beat it in one area, it'll pop up again and say, "Hey, here I am still," right? And there'll be something else that we're holding on to. I hope all of this study has helped you to be able to see something about you that says, what else can I be? It's helped give you some words, some definitions, some paths to follow that are different than whatever it is that's been your primary way of doing things. The good news is, as I look at you, what I see is magnificent people. People who are already developing well in each of these different areas. The other good thing about it is that you don't have to stop. Keep trying to become more and better and learn, because one of the worst things that can happen to us is when we already know it all. I'm only this path, and I can only see things this way. That's not good for us. And it's not good for you, for the people around you either, right? And if you're going to be a good ancestor to them, what you want to do is leave them as many things to choose from that will allow them to enhance themselves, right?
Oh, yeah.
Any last words?
Oh, I
Thank
want
you
to
for
say about
doing this.
what? Go. Judy?
I just said thank you for doing it. It's been a long time since I've been through this book, and it's been refreshing and important to do it again during this time, I think. I was reluctant to say anything about silence and solitude because I'm in a house with 3 generations. There's not much of either one.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard,
As
isn't
much
it?
as I ache for it, I can't quite make it happen. And so it's an interesting perspective.
It is.
I'd just like to thank you for doing this as well. And I really appreciate what Mike said in terms of thinking about what would be the healing direction that I can take in any given space, and to try to sort out which of those 4 archetypes is the one to reach for. So.
Yeah. And being that flexible to be able to choose between them and develop all of them in such a way that none of them is foreign to you is a huge gift you give to yourself and to those around you. Huge.
For men, oftentimes they have a toolbox in the garage. And for women, it's in the drawers, in the cupboards, in the kitchen. Which tool will be the most helpful tool to deal with what I've got to flip this over with, or how to turn this bolt? Those are the things that heal the problem that's in front of us.
That's right.
And I'm suffering because I want to heal it. I want to see it be healed.
Yeah.
And so when I've got the toolbox or the purse or whatever it is that I can go to, life is more comfortable, and I can feel that I can live more successfully.
Yeah. Any other last words?
I appreciate Jim. That's really good. Thank you very much.
Then let me turn us to one last thing to be able to do together. And it's words, but it's more than just words. At the back of the book, she puts this prayer, or this set of several prayers.
Where'd it go?
Here we go, right here.
Oh.
So you can see here's these different prayers written by Ralph Metzner. And in each one you can kind of see. So what I'd like for us to do is to pray these 4 prayers. And we're going to start at the north and go around the circle to the west, because that's the way we went through those. So will you pray with me where it's, can you read that all right? Is it pretty small writing?
Yeah, it's too small for me to.
And I will read it, and you guys can read along as you want to.
Do you have a page number?
It says, "O great spirit of the north, invisible spirit of the air, and of the fresh, cool winds, O vast and boundless grandfather sky, your living breath animates all life. Yours is the power of clarity and strength, power to hear the sound, to sweep out the old patterns,
and to
bring change and challenge, the ecstasy of movement and the dance. We pray that we may be aligned with you, so that your power may flow through us and be expressed by us for the good of this planet and all living beings upon it. To the east we pray, O great spirit of the east, radiance of the rising sun, Spirit of new
Beginnings.
beginnings. O grandfather fire, great nuclear fire of the sun, power of live energy, vital spark, power to see far and to imagine with boldness, power to purify our senses, our hearts, and our minds. We pray that we may be aligned with you, so that your powers may flow through us and be expressed by us for the good of this planet Earth and all living beings upon it. O great spirit of the South, protector of the fruitful land and of all green and growing things, the noble trees and grasses, grandmother Earth and soul of nature, great power of the receptive, of nurturance and endurance, power to grow and bring forth flowers of the field, fruits of the garden. We pray that we may be aligned with you, so that your powers may flow through us and be expressed by us for the good of this planet Earth and all living beings upon it. O great Spirit of the West, Spirit of the great waters, of rain, rivers, lakes, and springs. O grandmother ocean, deep matrix, womb of all life, power of dissolved boundaries, to release holdings, power to taste and to feel, to cleanse and to heal, great blissful darkness of peace. We pray that we may be aligned with you, so that your powers may flow through us and be expressed by us for the good of this planet and all living beings upon it. So north, south, east, west. Each path is a wondrous path. Go and discover them all and become better at each of them. Thank you for your time together with us.
Thank you.
Amen.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Everybody.
Bye-bye.
Jim, what do we do about our next session, you and I?
Our next session, oh yeah, because I have to record you, huh? Just stay on the line for a second.
Okay, Judy.
Yeah, I'm doing children's time, so he's gonna record me Zooming it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.